Welcome to the Strong AF podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Natasha Barnes. I'm a strength and rehab coach for climbers, and I blend my 24 years of expertise and experience as an elite level climber, competitive powerlifter, and rehab professional to bring you a podcast that will help you become stronger and more resilient. In this podcast, we'll talk about all things strength training for climbers. We'll also talk about climbing injuries, rehab, and why training and rehab go hand in hand. To connect, be sure to follow me over on Instagram at Natasha Barnes. To find out more about coaching or getting help with an injury, check out my website at natashabarnesrehab.com. And now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Strong AF podcast for episode number 10. We took a little bit of a break, but we are back for this episode, and I'm back to talk about my own journey in climbing and powerlifting so that you can get to know me a little bit better, because a lot of what I do is based on my own personal story and experiences as an athlete and as a human, and of course, my education. I've talked a little bit about this on other podcasts, but I just wanted to go through the full story so you could just get to know me a little bit better and maybe have a deeper understanding of why I do what I do and why I say what I say in my content if you follow me on Instagram. So let's dive right in. My climbing journey started because I saw Katie Brown climbing in the X Games on TV on a horizontal roof, and my dad pointed that out. I think I was 11 years old at the time. And my dad pointed that out and remarked on how rad it was. And I immediately was like, I could do that. Like, I could definitely do that. And as a kid, I was never involved in any formal sports or athletics. I tried a few things and nothing ever stuck. Nothing felt interesting for me. I would ride bikes and stuff, but other than that, I wasn't really athletic. But I was really into climbing on things, climbing in trees, climbing on buildings, climbing. So my dad took me to a gym that he was going to that had an indoor climbing wall, and we started going every weekend that I was with my dad. We would drag my brother and sister along, who I don't even think really liked climbing that much, but they went along with it. And we started climbing pretty regularly, and then the competition, or the wall that we were climbing on, had a competition, and they had a junior division. So I signed up for it, and I ended up winning that junior competition after only probably a few weeks of climbing. And I remember just being really excited and really drawn to climbing because it was the first sport where I felt like I had a sense of what to do. I felt like I was good at it. There were adults telling me that I was good at it. I won a competition, so obviously I was pretty decent compared to other kids, and that was really, really exciting to me. We probably went a few more times, but we ended up not going. We ended up stopping at some point. I think my brother and my sister were not that excited about it, so we had to stop going and doing other things. And it wasn't until high school that I started again. So I started up again in 1999. This is probably where I always tell people that's when I started, not when I was 11, even though I did have a bunch of climbing experience when I was younger. But when I was 16 in 1999, I started climbing with my friend John Wright at Recreation, California. John had a car and I did not. And that meant that we had a way to get to the climbing gym. So we started going to the climbing gym every Thursday, and every Thursday pretty quickly turned into every day. And I remember somebody at the gym challenged us to do every single top rope at the gym. So we just started on the left side of the gym and made our way around the gym until we climbed everything at the gym. And we were really hooked, and I started competing in junior climbing competitions. So back then they were called JCCA. They were all sport climbing competitions or top rope competitions. And that's kind of how I got my start in climbing comps. and started going to adult comps. We started going to the outdoor retailer show and going to adult competitions there, and including like the old PCA comps. If any of you guys remember that, those were so awesome. Like, probably the best comps to this day. Those were some of the raddest comps that were ever thrown. And they were in Salt Lake City at the front, at the old front, the very old front, and then at the new front. And we started doing those. And there were other adult like bouldering circuits that were starting. Is it ABC? Not ABC bouldering. BC, I don't remember the acronym, but there was an adult climbing series that started that was just bouldering. So then I started getting into like bouldering competitions a little bit more than sport climbing competitions. And yeah, and then there was like there was all these competition series that I would go to. So got really into indoor competition climbing. Touchstone Climbing had a bouldering series that they would do at all of their gyms. So we would drive up from Southern California to come up here and compete. Back then, they were doing cash prizes. I think they are doing cash prizes for some of their comps now again, but that was really cool. And going to things like the Gorge Games, which was like invitational. Things like the Teva Games, which now the Teva Games is actually like the Vail World Cup. And the Triple Crown, went to a whole bunch of Triple Crowns in the early 2000s, flew out there to go to a bunch of them. I don't think I ever won one. Lisa Rands was also competing back then, and I could never beat her. But I think I did get second place at a lot of them. Dark Horse, the Dark Horse series was always really fun in Boston. The Nor'easter, and also ended up doing a World Cup in Munich in 2004, I think, or 2005. Also won the Teva Games that year, won gold. Beat my friend Alex Johnson, which was really cool. Also happened to beat Alex Puccio at that competition, but it was before she was sort of like at her peak, so not too surprising. But I was really, really proud of that win. I still remember the moment that I won the competition, and I think Alex and I were maybe tied on all of the climbs. And one of the climbs, there was this really big, powerful lock off to a finished jug. And I remember getting up there, and I think it was probably my flash go, and so I was trying not to fall so that it wouldn't count against me and I wouldn't have to climb up there again. And I just remember the lock off being like really far, and I remember like locking off as hard as I possibly could and like pushing down, 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 and standing up on my foot and having my eyes closed and like knowing that if I could just get my fingertips on that jug, I would win. And I still remember that. It's a very visceral memory for me. And I was really proud of that win. That year, I also became bouldering national champion at, I think it was ABS is the name the acronym that I was looking for was ABS Nationals. So it was Bouldering Nationals, that happened in Berkeley, and I won that one. So I became the bouldering national champion in 2005, which felt pretty cool, to win a bouldering competition like that, a big one, a national level one. So that was really cool. Right around that time, I was also starting to climb outdoors a little bit. I was climbing outdoors a little bit probably before that too. We would go to Bishop a lot. We would go to Mount Charleston in Vegas for sport climbing. I was really bad at sport climbing back then because I was really scared to fall. And I just had a really, really hard time overcoming that. So I could only really send things that, like, I always used to joke that I could only send it if I knew I could solo it. It was really hard to overcome that. And I wasn't as drawn to sport climbing as I was to bouldering because of that. But we would go to Bishop. I remember being in Bishop in the early 2000s. I literally remember being in the Buttermilks in 2001 and being one of two cars there on a weekend, which was pretty wild. And I remember back then it was normal to only have like a few cars at the Happy Boulders. And one day we showed up and there were 10 cars there. And I remember feeling like, oh man, it's going to be crowded up there today. And if you've climbed in Bishop before at the Happy Boulders, you know that nowadays it's pretty normal to have like 70, 80, 100 cars in that parking lot. So 10 cars back then was really not that many people, but it was back before climbing was as popular. And also, there wasn't a guidebook for Bishop back then. There was like a little fold out pamphlet that we had to go off of, or you just had to like know the local climbers or the people who were putting stuff up there and get shown around to things. So that was really cool to be there that early. Was also climbing in Squamish a few times back then. Sent my first V10 in Bishop, my first V10 ever, I think, in, I want to say 2003, and it was Lowrider. At the Happy Boulders, if you're familiar with that one. And I think my second and third V10s were in Squamish. It was like 00 and the Great Escape. So those were really memorable. Also started climbing in Waco, and Waco's great because if you are in gym shape, you can climb really well there. So I was climbing really well there. Did a bunch of stuff in Waco, including a bunch of V10s, like Swiss Crisp Mix, flashing a V10 like doggy jump, which was really cool. That's a really technical, really crimpy one that I was really surprised to flash, but I was really at the peak of my competitive climbing career at that time. So I think my fingers were really strong. And like I said, Waco is really outdoor. If you can climb well at the gym, you can climb pretty well in Waco. So it went along with that really well. We were filming a video. We were filming videos back then with Paul DeSatko, Soul Cal. If anybody has watched that video, those were really fun to film. We climbed in Waco. We also climbed in Bishop. It was fun going around with that gang of people and climbing. That was a really memorable experience, and they were just really fun to climb with. And I really felt like I was pushing myself. Climbed a lot in J Tree, also down in SoCal, and a little bit in San Diego back then. But right around that same time, I suffered from a pretty bad finger injury. So after winning gold at the Teva Games and after winning nationals, I competed at another comp at the front. I think it was maybe like a winter trade show competition. I don't think it was PCA back then. I don't think it was PCA still. It might have been though. It was one of those comps at the front, and I remember climbing in that competition and having a sore finger, but it was like my first time ever experiencing that. And I was like, okay, like my finger's sore, but like it seems fine. Like it doesn't feel like climbing is making it worse, or like this is going to be a bad thing. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and do the competition. So I did the whole competition. Everything was fine. I placed third, and I was really upset because I wanted to win, obviously. And also back then I had sponsorship deals that I would get paid if I did win. I would get paid more. They would match your prize purse. So I was also upset because like I didn't make as much money, and like I needed that money. So I remember being upset after that. I remember my finger feeling definitely a little bit more sore after the competition, but didn't really think anything of it. And then after the competition, they had this dyno comp that you could participate in. I think they had like a little cash purse for it, and everybody was doing it. I remember Megan Martin was there and lots of other climbers, Emily Harrington, a bunch of other people. And so I decided to enter the dyno competition, and it was just on jugs. Like it wasn't anything crazy, but the very first dyno that they had us do in the dyno competition, I remember setting up for it and pushing off of the initial jug to go for the jump. And the moment I like pushed off, I felt this huge pop in my right middle finger. It felt like a giant explosion, and it felt like my entire hand was like vibrating and tingly after that. And I just immediately fell to the ground. Everybody was kind of looking at me like they didn't really know what happened. And immediately I started crying because I just knew with the way that the finger was feeling, that was it. I thought, I was like, this is it. Like, I'm never going to get to this level again. My climbing career is ruined. I don't know how I'm going to make money anymore. It was very upsetting. And I remember the finger got pretty swollen. It got discolored. I remember icing it right after and just went home after that and didn't really know what to do. There were not any rehab professionals that knew how to deal with finger injuries back then. There were like zero climbing professionals. I remember there was a doctor who was doing like prolotherapy in Salt Lake City. And I had heard about that and I knew it was really, really expensive, but I had thought about saving up some money to go do that because I thought maybe that was like an answer. Because medical doctors had no idea, people who worked in physical therapy had no idea. Everybody's advice was to just like rest or to stop climbing. And for somebody who really loves climbing and somebody who's also making their living climbing, that was not a good answer. But I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't really afford to talk to the doctor who was offering prolotherapy. So I ended up just resting. I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to rest until the finger feels better. And I did that. I rested for 4 months and I tried to pick up other hobbies. I tried to pick up yoga. I tried to pick up cycling, which was pretty fun. I was doing Bikram yoga. I remember the yoga studio by my house had like a 30 days for $30 for Bikram yoga. And so I literally did Bikram yoga for 30 days straight. And then I just continued to do it because I couldn't climb. So that was like an interesting experience. It's pretty hard. It's very hot. And yeah, I don't know if I would go back and do it, but I was into it back then. Yeah, so about 4 months in, I was like, all right, well, it feels a little bit better. Like maybe I can climb on some jugs. So I went to the gym and tried to do some like top rope on like some really juggy stuff. And just remember like getting on like a 10A that was like pretty juggy and like feeling the finger still hurting. And so I was like, all right, I still can't really climb on it. So I rested for another couple of months. So at that point, it had been 6 months. I felt like I was getting really out of shape. I actually started losing sponsors. Some of my sponsors started dropping me, which meant that my income was going to go down because one of the sponsors that dropped me, I was getting paid monthly by them. So that was really stressful. I already wasn't making very much money as a professional climber back then. So yeah, I mean, my whole world was basically crumbling. I had really, really wrapped my whole identity and how I was making money and everything that I cared about around climbing. So, I was very depressed at that point, kind of hopeless, didn't know if I was ever going to be able to climb again. And I remember I decided to go on a trip with Ethan Pringle to this bouldering destination in Northern California called Lost Rocks. And Lost Rocks is a really magical place. If you've never been there or heard about it, it's probably 5 or 6 hours north of San Francisco on the coast, and it's at the mouth of the Klamath River there. And it's a pretty magical place. The beach is scattered with rocks. Your background is like a forest, like a redwood forest, and the ocean is right there. The rocks are on the ocean. It's just beautiful, and nothing has grades or names or anything there. So there was just like no real expectation from myself to climb there. And I remember doing some climbs there that I could tolerate with my finger and topping out on one and just being like, wow, like it's so beautiful here. I'm just really enjoying the experience of like moving over rock. And it kind of dawned on me like this is why I climb. Like it's not to be the best competition climber. It's not to climb the hardest rocks, even though before that it was like, yeah, I only care about being the best competition climber I possibly can. I only care about climbing the hardest grades that I can. Like I would just find I didn't care what anything looked like. if it was a good piece of rock or not. If it had a hard grade, I wanted to do it, you know? And after that, I was like, wow, I want to climb for the experience. And that was a really big, like, mental shift for me. And in that same trip, I remember getting on something that these things didn't have grades, so I don't know for sure, but it probably felt around like V4, and it was crimpy. And I remember crimping on the holds on this climb at Lost Rocks and feeling like I wasn't sure if the amount of like pain that I was feeling in my finger was tolerable or not, or like was okay or not, like safe. But at that point, I was like at a loss, you know. I was at my rock bottom. I was at my wit's end with the injury. I didn't really know what to do. So I was like, I'm just going to climb on it. Like, worst case scenario, worst case scenario, maybe I make it worse, and maybe then there's like a surgery I can get that will make my finger better. So I started climbing on it, and I remember feeling like, oh, this is like probably making it worse. Like, this might not be a good idea. And after that, it turned a corner and it started feeling better. And I sort of had this light bulb moment. I had this light bulb go off in my head, and I was like, oh my God, like, you can't just wait for these injuries to get better. You have to make them get better. Like, they need stress. You need to climb on it. And like, obviously I shouldn't be going and doing like crimpy hard stuff, but like some stuff that felt slightly uncomfortable is probably okay. And it felt, I could feel in my finger that it was like stimulating some healing. And that was a really big aha moment for me. And that was sort of like a good turning point where I finally felt like there was some hope that I could get back into climbing again. So I ended up moving up to San Francisco because at the time I was dating Ethan Pringle, and that's where he lived with his family. So I moved up to San Francisco, where I've basically been since then. Not in San Francisco now, I'm in Oakland, but Bay Area. So moved up here, started climbing at the Touchstone gyms, started climbing at Mission Cliffs, and met a bunch of cool people. Met one of my really good friends, Audrey Bodisco, and her husband Carl, and started climbing with them a lot, and their friend Louise. And we would like sport climb in the lead area sometimes we would boulder. And then I met Cicada Generic and Scott Generic, who had like a youth climbing team at Touchstone called Zero Gravity. If anybody listening remembers Zero Gravity, the Zero Gravity days were great. And Scott Generic sort of took me under his wing and helped me train again, helped build me a training program that I could start following. I was too old for the youth team at that point. I think I was like 22 or maybe 23 at that point. I don't remember. But maybe I was a little bit younger. No, I think I was at least 22. But yeah, I was too old for the youth team, but he let me climb with the youth team, and I climbed a lot with Cicada and a bunch of other people on that team, and it was really great for me. Like, it really, really helped me get back into climbing shape again, and it really pushed me to get stronger as a climber again, and things started turning around, and I started being able to climb. I started getting back to my old self, and it felt really good. And right around then, I also started climbing in Yosemite, because Yosemite is only 4 hours away from San Francisco, and Yosemite is like a rock climbing school. Like, there are so many lessons to learn climbing on that rock there. And I remember going there and being told that I would feel humbled, but not expecting how humbled I would feel when I went there, especially if you're climbing in Camp 4. The rock there is slick, it's granite, it's very technical. You can't just be a gym climber and go there and like crush in Yosemite. You actually have to have like good outdoor climbing skills. You have to be able to trust really small feet. Like, sometimes you're just standing on like a little granite crystal, and it was really difficult for me. And I almost wrote it off. I almost told myself, like, I don't like climbing here, I'm not going to come back. But I stuck with it, and I met this woman named Lynn Barraza who climbs out there with a crew of folks, and she is so strong. And I remember watching her climb King Cobra, which is a really famous V8 in Camp 4, and just being really impressed with like not only how strong she was, but also just with like her technical skill on rock. I have never ever seen that before. That level of skill, that level of strength. And it was really, really inspiring. And I started climbing more with them, and I learned a lot from Lynn. We're the same height. I think we have the same wingspan. But she was like a big inspiration for a lot of the climbs that I ended up doing in Yosemite. And she was also like somebody who was really good at figuring out beta. Like she's the same height as me, and so we could always use the same beta. And I learned a lot about finding beta from her because she would find some positions or moves or a different sequence that I just at the time never even thought of, or like a certain nuance of like how to balance on the rock, or like put your foot here and you're back flagging, but you actually have to back flag right here onto this crystal because it gets your hip in the exact spot to be able to catch that hold without swinging out. Like the nuances of climbing in Yosemite. And yeah, climbing in Yosemite made me a really, really, really good technical rock climber. And I'm super grateful for the climbing there. It will forever be my favorite place to climb. I ended up climbing things like King Cobra, Thriller, which is like a really famous tall V10. That was like a big moment for me because it's a really famous rock climb. It's tall, it's rated V10, it's in Yosemite Valley. Yosemite Valley is pretty sandbagged, to be honest. Like something like that might be rated a lot harder somewhere else, if in my opinion. And I kind of enjoy that challenge of Yosemite of how sandbagged some of the climbs can be there, especially like in Camp 4. So it feels like extra good to send stuff there because you know it's not soft, and you really have to work for it too because a lot of these climbs you can't practice all of the moves. And I don't know why we didn't think about this back then, but because I know it's really common now, but back then we didn't like have ladders. We didn't like rappel off the top of the boulder and practice the moves. Like when I was climbing back there in like probably 2008 to 2000, maybe like 12 or 13, we would just climb from the ground. So it was ground up every attempt unless you could get like a little boost. But there are climbs, especially like Thriller, that are tall enough you can't get boosted all the way up there. You have to climb up there. And so what ends up happening is like when you unlock the next move on a climb that you haven't done before, you're all of a sudden you're like in like you've never been up there before. It's like you have to flash that part if you're going to do it because you've never practiced that part, whereas you've practiced climbing into that part a bunch of different times as you are trying to send these climbs. And I think it's actually kind of it's definitely not the most efficient way to project climbs, but it is a way that does make you a very good climber because you are basically repeating these things over and over and over and over and over again, and you get really good at them and you get really technically good, and you learn little nuances of how to make the move more efficient. You learn that Yosemite is also really interesting with like the weather because it gets cold there, and like with granite you want good cold weather, but it also gets humid there, and the humidity can like significantly affect how sticky the rock feels. This is probably like a lot of places, but Yosemite to me feels extra finicky in this regard. And there are just days where you like get on the climb and you're like, today's not the day. Like I'm still gonna climb on it, I'm still gonna get my practice in, but yeah, the humidity is like not what you need it to be, and on certain climbs it really makes a difference. But I think it's really fun to like have to ground up these climbs. And to this day, like I feel like I still remember how to climb a lot of them because I've practiced those moves so many times trying to get up to the parts that I was falling. So that was really fun. Thriller was like a huge, probably like Thriller's probably if not like the most significant send, just because it's such an iconic climb. It's definitely in my top three. I also got the first female ascent of a V9 called the Force on that boulder, which was really sick. It's very crimpy. There is some short person beta that makes it helpful. There's a heel hook down low that my friend Mark Heel actually pointed out. That helped me unlock the send. I also climbed Midnight Lightning. Midnight Lightning is really funny because I feel like if you're tall, the crux is actually the mantle, but if you're short, the crux is hitting the lightning bolt. So I followed Lynn Hill's beta pretty much exactly, which you can find on YouTube. And somebody did film, I think Scott Chandler filmed my ascent of Thriller, but I never got that footage. So it's out there in the world. It's out there somewhere on a videotape or something, or on a card, not a SIM card. Forgetting the name, but I wish I had that footage. Because back then when we were doing all of this climbing, I didn't have an iPhone. Like, we weren't taking out photos. Like, sometimes people had cameras. Some people might have had like little grainy videos on their phone. I think somebody got a video of my ascent of Thriller, which I think is on my Instagram somewhere. But we didn't really have a lot of videos of stuff back then, which is kind of disappointing. But the very first time I stuck the lightning bolt on Midnight Lightning, I sent the rest of it because you can just fit right into that like high step on the mantle. And it is a really big lock off. Like, you have to really, like, I was fully maxed out on the mantle to reach the very last hold when you stand up out of the mantle. Like, I literally don't think I could have reached another millimeter. I was completely maxed out. But obviously that was a really proud send because it's Midnight Lightning. I waited a really long time to get on that one because it's right in the middle of Camp 4. So anytime anyone is on that, people automatically come over and like start watching you, start asking you questions, and it just feels like you're like in the spotlight on that climb. So I remember waiting like a really long time. I sent a bunch of other stuff before I had sent Midnight because I just didn't want a bunch of people watching me try to project it, I guess. But that was really fun. Sent a bunch of really other really cool and hard things, and also a lot of really cool not hard things in Yosemite. Some of my hardest climbs, some of my proudest climbs, and some of my hardest and most meaningful climbs are in Yosemite because just how demanding, technically demanding, the climbing is there, and how tall everything is. My hardest climbs are there too, just because I've had the most time to project stuff there. So my hardest climbs are a climb called Drive On, which is like basically like a 10-degree overhung V11 razor crimp line that is also like very technical because I remember one of the holds on that climb, it's not even a crimp, it's like 3 little crystals that you have to get your index, middle, and ring finger on with a little crystal for a thumb catch. And you're basically like hooking yourself on that and then relying on friction to like hang on that hold to do basically the crux move on that climb. And conditions are like very important. So one season I was climbing it and I managed to stick the crux move finally, and got through to the top. And the very last move at the top, you're just going off of this Gaston to like a jug, like a huge jug at the top. And I remember getting so excited that I had gotten past the crux that I fumbled the jug. I fumbled it. Like, my fingers got to it and I just fumbled it and fell. And you only get really like a few attempts on that climb before your skin is just like, you don't have the skin to hang on that like crystal hold anymore. And so I remember I couldn't get back up there again. And literally the next day it snowed like heavily and the season was completely over. And in Yosemite, like when it snows, it's just, the season is just over. Like, there's too much snow. There's too many boulders. Like, most of the time you're not digging stuff out. It's going to be wet anyway because there's snow on top, and it's just over, and you can't come back until spring. So I remember when I finally sent it, I had to come back and relearn all the beta, relearn all of like the subtle body positions on that climb. Um, and then I finally sent it. But yeah, that one was pretty epic and hard for me. And I have a lot of really fond memories of climbing in Yosemite. There were times where I would go there every single weekend, and like even going there every single weekend, when you get into the valley and you see El Cap, it's like, wow, like it is jaw dropping every single time. And I have been there so many times, like every weekend for years and years and years and years and years. And it's still just unbelievable how big El Cap is and how big the rocks are there and how beautiful it is and just how good it is. And I'm really, really surprised that Yosemite isn't like a bigger destination than it is. It's probably a good thing because there's already like a lot of tourists there unless you're there in like the winter or the fall. But yeah, I just remember like people saying they're gonna go to Switzerland, they're gonna go here, they're gonna go there, they're gonna fly here for bouldering, they're gonna fly there for bouldering, and I was always just like, why don't you come to Yosemite? Like, it's so good here. Like, why don't you come here? And I remember trying really hard to convince people to come to Yosemite, but I think that people are, I don't know, they don't realize how good the climbing is there, or they know that it's like very sandbagged and hard, and they don't want to get shut down. I don't really know. Um, but I have gone there with some very, 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 very high level climbers back in the day, and they could not send V10 there. So, and they threw wobblers because they could not send V10 there because it's technical. Like, you don't, most people can't just go to Yosemite and like climb double digits. It's not going to happen because you have to learn how to climb on granite there. So, very, probably one of my favorite place to climb, like I said. I also spent a lot of time climbing at a sport climbing area there called Jailhouse. And Jailhouse is like really fun. It's like I think it's basalt. It's a huge basalt cave, a huge overhung basalt cave. Lots of blocks, more knee bars than even rifle. There's like levels to the knee bars there too. Like there's huge clunker knee bars, and then there's like very technical knee scums that you can climb there. There's even a 13D that I tried there one time where you literally can't pull yourself back onto the wall because the holds are so non-existent there. Like it's literal rock crawling. So you have to like grab the draw and like stick your knee scum in and then stick your other knee scum in and then just kind of like gecko onto the wall, and like really the only thing that's holding you on is like your knee scums, and you do a hand move and then you do a knee scum and a knee scum and then another hand move and then walk your feet and another knee scum and another knee scum. It's crazy. That one is probably the most knee bar intensive climb at Jailhouse, but Jailhouse is very knee bar intensive. Really, really fun climbing. I had a lot of fun climbing there. And finally became like a better sport climber. Finally became less afraid to fall. And I don't really know what did it for me. I don't know. I just sort of bypassed all of my feelings that I was having about being scared to fall in sport climbing. And I just was like, just get over it. Just get over it. You're not afraid anymore. Just get over it. And, just took a few whips at Jailhouse and then was just over it. And I could just sport climb and I wasn't afraid of falling anymore. And I wish I had like some better beta on like how to get over. I mean, I do have better beta on how to get over your fear of falling, but none of that is what I did for myself. I literally just told myself, get over it, stop being afraid. And then I just shifted my mindset and I wasn't afraid anymore. And that definitely doesn't work for everybody, but it worked for me. And I ended up sending some of my hardest sport climbs ever there, including a 13D, which I was very proud to send. Some people call it 14A. I was really proud to send it. And I remember Ethan Pringle was there. We were no longer dating at that point, but we're still friends, obviously. And I remember going on a sport climbing trip with him and just being really scared. I think we went to like Rifle or something, and like I couldn't climb anything unless it was like a bouldery short thing. I think the hardest thing I've climbed in Rifle is like Chud 13A or something like that. And I was just like getting scared on everything, saying take, like not sending anything, just kind of like embarrassed, you know? And then when I sent my 13D, Ethan was there, and I think he sent it right before me, and I tied him to the same rope as him. And I think he might have even been the one belaying me. I can't remember. No, I think maybe someone else was belaying me, but I just remember sending it and just being really proud, and like being proud that Ethan got to see that like I got over my fear of falling and that I became good at sport climbing. So that was a really great moment for me. Um, Climbing at Jailhouse. And I also did a little bit of like trad in Yosemite and Squamish, got into trad climbing. I've probably been trad climbing like, I don't know, probably a handful of times, which was really fun. Got to get on things like Astroman and the Rostrum. And I actually sent the generator crack, if you know what that is. It's like a very wide off width. Not a very wide off width. It's like actually a narrow off width. But it's really hard. I mean, it's not graded hard. I think it's graded like 10B, but it's like notoriously difficult. And I remember hearing that and getting really into like off width climbing, and I ended up sending it like second try, and I was really proud of that because it's supposed to be a very difficult one pitch off width climb. Also sent my hardest trad lead on Astroman. I sent the 11C like boulder problem pitch. I was really proud of that. Learned how to place gear and build anchors and stuff like that. And did some trad climbing and Squamish, like I said, which trad climbing and Squamish is like a luxury because all of the anchors are bolted. It's just so nice. Can't recommend it enough. But got into a little bit of trad climbing just for a second. But sort of after that, I started feeling a little burnt out with climbing. Like I don't know, I had spent so many years pushing myself in competitions and pushing myself outdoors. I was starting to just feel a little burnt out. I kept getting like injured, which was really frustrating. And I just, I don't know, I just was like losing some of my psych for it. Even when we filmed a bouldering film called Park Life in Yosemite. And I remember everybody getting interviewed for that, and everybody was like, climbing is my life. I love it. I never want to stop doing it. This is the only thing I want to do. And I was like the only one that was like, it's not everything for me. Like I'm going to go to school. I'm going to school to do something else. And I think it's good to have like some balance. And I remember being like the only one in the film who was like, it's not everything for me. But yeah, it didn't feel like it was everything for me anymore, and I did want to start doing something different. So I ended up going to chiropractic school. And the reason I went to chiropractic school, I was like debating about whether going to medical school or going to chiropractic school. But my dad used to go to a chiropractor, and the chiropractor was like a sports chiropractor, so he didn't just do like chiropractic work. He also did like rehab, and stuff like that. And he helped my dad. My dad is like super athletic too, and he helped my dad a lot with like with injuries, like back injuries and shoulder injuries and things like that. And I got to see what that chiropractor did, and I thought it was pretty cool. And I decided to go the chiropractic school route, and did that. And I wanted to do it because I wanted to help climbers. I wanted to make sure that I learned about sports injuries, and that no climbers ever had to feel as like hopeless or depressed as I did when I had that initial finger injury, and when I had other subsequent like shoulder and other finger injuries that came up after that. I wanted to like really help the climbing community in that way. So that's why I chose it. Graduated from chiropractic school, started working at like a sports medicine clinic. My practice has evolved a lot since then, and I don't really do chiropractic like chiropractic adjustments or like manual therapy anymore. I do a lot of rehab and counseling. So a lot of my sessions are helping people with exercise and helping people get stronger and helping people get back into climbing so that they don't have to stay injured. Because I started realizing that like chiropractic work was just like a temporary solution. Like it, of course, it can feel good to get adjusted. It can feel good to get massage, all of that. But it was really just like a temporary fix for a lot of the issues that I was seeing climbers for. And I started realizing that they needed to get stronger. They needed to build strength so that they could tolerate climbing. They needed to build strength and tissue capacity and fitness, so that they could better climb and so that they could have that foundation for climbing. And I also started realizing that for myself. And right around when I first graduated from school, which was in 2012, I also started working at a clinic downtown in San Francisco. And in that same building, there was a strength gym. And I remember walking past it every single day and like seeing the guys in there doing stuff with kettlebells and barbells. And finally, I just walked in there one day and I was like, teach me how to get stronger. So I started learning how to use kettlebells. And I noticed right away that like it helped a lot with the shoulder injury that I was dealing with. And I had done some of the normal PT stuff and that I knew, and it helped a little bit, but it wasn't really getting me to a place where I could like climb as hard as I wanted on the injury. And so I sort of had this sense that I needed to get stronger anyway, because I have always been like a climber who has really strong fingers, really good technique, all of that. Like I had those boxes checked. I really felt like my limiting factor was actual strength, like body strength. And so I also wanted to get stronger just because I had an intuition that it would help my climbing. And so I decided to do it, and I started working with them and going like regularly a few times a week and lifting on my own at the climbing gym. When I first started, I was not very good at it. My bench press was like the empty barbell was all I could bench press. My squats, I think I started my squats at like 65 pounds. And my deadlift was pretty good. Climbers tend to be good at deadlifting. So I remember I could deadlift like 185 pounds when I first started, which I felt like was pretty good. But my bench press and my squat were so bad. And I remember getting stuck around an 85-pound squat and like having some back pain from it and just feeling like it didn't feel right for my body. And I felt like the sport just wasn't for me. And like at that point in time, I was like considering just like not doing it anymore. Like I was like, I don't think I should do squats. I don't think I should do like powerlifting style movements, because I think my body's just not made for this, because I'm getting like I feel hurt doing it and I don't understand like why that's happening. And I remember I started working with my coach Josh, and he took over my training, and he actually like re-taught me how to squat. He gave me some like form tips and started programming for me. And I remember literally the first day I started working with him, and this is why it's like so important to, this is why it can be so important to work with a coach, because they can just unlock some things for you. And I remember the first day I worked with him, I was like struggling with like an 85-pound squat. It was like bothering my back. That same day I squatted 125 pounds, and I was like, oh my God, like we figured this out. Like we figured out a position that just works better for my body. Like he was able to coach me into the movement a little bit better. And immediately I was like excited again and kept training. And I even did a little bit of CrossFit. The CrossFit gym I used to go to is called United Barbell in San Francisco. It's still there. And they have every year this competition, which is basically like a super total. So it's like your 1 rep max snatch, which is an Olympic movement, a 1 rep max clean and jerk, 1 rep max squat, bench, and deadlift. So it was like a weightlifting meet combined with a powerlifting meet. And I remember like telling Josh that I wanted to do that. We trained for it. I went and did that, and I remember I squatted 195 pounds, which I was really proud of. I I think I bench pressed. What did I bench press? I think I might have bench pressed like 95 pounds at that point. And then I deadlifted 260 pounds, which felt really badass at the time. I was like, wow. Now I can squat that easily. So that's one of the cool things about getting stronger. But that was a really exciting for me. And it was sort of like a turning point where I was like, okay, I don't want to do CrossFit. I don't want to play around with kettlebells. I want to do powerlifting. Like, I just like this barbell stuff. I want to do this. And that's sort of when I transitioned into my journey of wanting to be a power lifter. And that was probably around 2013 or 14. And I stopped being vegan. So I was vegan for a really, really long time, for 8 years. And around that time, I also stopped being vegan because I started learning about nutrition and I started learning about like macros and like protein and how much protein I needed. And I remember like tracking my protein intake. And I'm not saying it's impossible to do this as a vegan, but it's just a little bit harder, especially if you're a smaller person like me, to get enough protein without also getting a whole bunch of fat and carbs. And when you're tracking your macros, you have like a set number of carbohydrates you can get, you eat for the day, a set amount of fat that you eat for the day, and these are in grams, and then a certain amount of protein that you're supposed to eat. And I had a really hard time hitting my protein target without also eating like a ton of fat and carbs, which I didn't necessarily like need to be eating that much of. So it just started getting really challenging, and I was doing like 3 protein shakes a day. When I first started tracking, I was getting like 60 grams of protein on a good day. So that was pretty bad because you're supposed to be getting around 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per pound body weight. So I needed a lot more protein than I was getting. And I ended up stopping being vegan, and I started eating eggs again. And then I started eating fish again, and then I started eating chicken again, and then I just started eating everything after that. And I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell any of my vegan friends because I didn't want them to know. And yeah, right around then too, I also decided like, okay, like I want to squat, I want to bench, I want to deadlift heavy, and I will do whatever it takes to be able to get stronger. And that's when I made the decision to intentionally gain weight. So when I first started strength training, I weighed around 112 pounds, I think. And I remember before I started strength training, I wanted to be actually smaller. I'm 5'2". Hopefully, like, mentioning weight's not triggering to anybody, but you can fast forward this part if you don't want to hear it. Yeah, I was 5'2", 112 pounds. I wanted to be way lighter than that. Like, I thought I wanted to be like 105 pounds, which is crazy. And since then, I've been as heavy as 162 pounds. So I gained a lot of weight over several years. And I've dropped weight too. But my weight range has fluctuated between that much. And yeah, it felt really good. If you want to put on significant muscle mass, and I wanted to because I wanted to compete in powerlifting, like I wasn't concerned about climbing. I had stopped climbing at that point because I was just like, I want to focus on this other sport. I want to put everything into it. It feels really exciting to me. It feels fun to like feel new at something and like making progress. And the only way you're going to put muscle on is if you commit to eating more food, and if you commit to gaining a little body fat in the process. Like, you can't stay super lean and put on a ton of muscle mass. So I really committed to the weight gain. It felt really scary to have my body change, but when I learned a little bit more about nutrition, when I learned how weight loss and weight gain is all about calorie balance, and I learned that like it's just about hitting like a certain amount of macros for protein, carbs, and fat, and that it's all very controllable. Before that, it was like a mystery to me. I was like, how do you gain weight? How do you lose weight? Like, what if I gain weight and I don't like it? Like, what do I do? How can I back out of it? and learning that it's like basically just math and that it's all very controllable and that it's literally like what bodybuilders do competitively, like took a lot of the stress out of it for me. And I was able to chill out and just let myself gain weight. And I got way stronger, like way stronger. And I do not regret it whatsoever. Um, I did feel like it felt scary to deprioritize climbing because it's like the thing that I had always known and like the thing that I had always cared about. All of my friends were climbers. Um, it felt scary to me. And I felt worried that I wouldn't be able to get back into climbing or that I wouldn't ever want to get back into climbing. And it felt scary to like potentially say goodbye to that. And also like a lot of my clients are climbers. Like I work with climbers, and so I felt like kind of bad that I wasn't climbing, because I work with climbers all day. I talk about climbing all day, and now and then at that point I was just doing powerlifting. And there was a little bit of guilt about disappointing people because I also felt pressure, whether it was like real or not, from people about not wasting my climbing talent. Like, I think a lot of people saw how good I was at climbing, and also, like, maybe they wanted to be that good at climbing. And by transitioning into a different sport, it felt like a lot of people were disappointed and like thought that I was like wasting my talent. So there was just like a lot going on there for me. Um, and I felt guilty for disappointing people, but now I know that like it doesn't matter. It matters if I like it or not. And obviously I didn't listen to that because I continued to get more and more into powerlifting. And climbers didn't like it. Climbers didn't like it. I saw how much getting stronger helped my injuries. I saw how getting stronger was helping my clients for rehab. I started talking about it for climbers. I started writing about it. There wasn't really anybody talking about strength training for climbers back then. Really, the only thing I could find was like Steve Bechtel talking about it, Steve from Climb Strong. It was like just us talking about it, and like people telling us that we are crazy for telling climbers to strength train. Like, why would climbers strength train? They're going to gain weight. Why would they train their legs? That's just dead weight they have to drag up the wall. I had people tell me that I was a quack for telling climbers to strength train. I got all kinds of negative comments, all kinds of people like talking about how dumb it was. Yeah, initially there was a lot of criticism for strength training for climbers, and it was really, really hard to convince people to want to do it. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of climbers saw the benefit. A lot of my clients trusted me and they saw the benefit. And like the more people start doing it and talking about it and like showing other people that there's benefit to it, like the more things started to change. And I think strength training in general is just getting more popular across the United States and probably the world. And so it's just been a slow trend into like climbers finally accepting that strength training is a good thing to do. And we still have a lot of work to do and a ways to go. But yeah, I mean, initially it was, there was a lot of pushback for sure. But I really loved powerlifting. I love feeling strong. Powerlifting is a very different community than climbing, but it's very welcoming, very supportive. At least in my experience, I've met a lot of really cool people through powerlifting. I feel like the community is super supportive. Going to a powerlifting competition sounds like a really intimidating thing to do, but everybody there is like so cool, so supportive. People will try to help you. People are cheering and clapping for you. Like it's so supportive, kind of similar to how climbing can feel sometimes. And the biggest thing is I was really surprised at how like body positive slash body neutral powerlifting is. Like people aren't criticizing each other's bodies. People aren't telling you need to be bigger or smaller or look a certain way. It felt really refreshing because especially like back when I was competing, when I was a youth climber and when I was doing competition climbing and even all the way up until now, there's just sort of this pressure, this unconscious, unspoken pressure that you have to be smaller as a climber. And even though like that is starting to slowly change, it is still like the widely accepted view that like you need to be smaller to be a climber. You need to be have a smaller body type, like less muscle, you need to be leaner. And it's unfortunate because everybody can feel that, and it influences and affects the community. And powerlifting really doesn't feel like that. It feels very body positive or even body neutral, which I love. And there's people of all shapes and sizes in powerlifting, and it's just really cool to see. So I love it. And powerlifting also really helped me learn a lot more about training and to have a lot more patience, to be a more mature athlete, to be more process oriented, and to think longer term. Like I remember going to climbing competitions, we would be like, oh, the competition is happening in 2 weeks. I guess we should do some training. And then we would do some training for 2 weeks, and then we would go to the competition and like think that that training did something. And now when I'm looking at my training, I'm thinking like a year in advance sometimes. Like, when am I going to do my next powerlifting meet? It might not be until next summer. And I'm planning ahead of time for that. And I know that like for powerlifting competitions, like I want to make sure that I'm training for that like 2.5, 3 weeks, or sorry, 2.5, 3 months, or maybe longer before that, because it takes a long time for the training to actually work and for your body to respond. And so it's just made me think a little more long term, and less short term with like my performance as well. And it's just made me more patient, and it's just made me appreciate training a lot more. So I really like it for that. And yeah, I mean, it was just really cool to see my progress, and I've been doing it for 10 years now. And I think, if you've just started following me on Instagram, or you just have known me for the last few years, you'd probably think like, oh wow, she's really strong. Like, of course she powerlifts, she's strong. Not true. Like, I was not strong. I just stuck around for 10 years, started bench pressing with an empty bar. And now in 2023, I have multiple powerlifting records in the bench press. But it's because I kept showing up. I showed up for 10 years. I think that I can probably count on like one hand, maybe two at the most, the number of sessions I've missed in the last 10 years. I've been very consistent. And so powerlifting has really taught me about consistency. And it's crazy to see what you can do in 10 years. It's crazy how much stronger you can get. It's crazy how much your body can change. It's just very cool to see that. And so I love that part of powerlifting. And I love competing in powerlifting. And I don't see myself slowing down at all in my 40s. And I'm 40 years old now, and I compete in masters in powerlifting. I'm a masters lifter now, which is like so funny to say, but I love the sport. I love training for it. I love the process of it, and it's always going to be in my life to some degree, because now I also know I'm thinking even longer term, like not just what I'm doing in the next year, but how my body's going to be feeling in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Like, I want to make sure that I strength train. I want to make sure that it's fun for me and that I want to do it, and that I find ways to keep it in my lifestyle, because it's going to set me up so much more when I'm older, because I'm starting with so much more muscle mass, and I'm not going to be like a frail old lady who falls down the stairs and breaks her hip when I'm old, because I'm going to have the strength to walk up the stairs. I'm going to have the strength to balance. I'm going to be hopefully independent when I'm very, very old, because of the muscle mass that I have. And the muscle mass that I have now is also protective against a lot of diseases that happen when you get older. So very important for me to make sure that I keep powerlifting fun. And at least strength training, I'm going to be always doing it for the rest of my life. But it's pretty cool to see that, like, I think we all have this mindset of like, okay, once you hit 30 or once you hit 40, like things start going downhill. But I have a lot of friends who are just getting stronger and stronger from 30, 40, 50 and beyond. And it's really cool in powerlifting because it's literally the sport of pure strength. And you can see people in their 40s, in their 50s, in their 60s, like continuing to get stronger, and doing really, really cool stuff at an old age, which I love to see. And I'm trying to sort of spread that message to my friends. I'm trying to spread that message to climbers. I feel great in my 40s. Like, I feel my body doesn't hurt. I sleep well. I have a lot of work capacity. I can climb and I can power lift in the same day. Like, I don't get physically tired from climbing. It's just like there's so much benefit to, you don't have to power lift, but strength training. And so that's part of why I do what I do online and why I promote strength training to everybody, because it's just been so great for me. It's been so great for my friends that strength train. And I want everybody else to experience the benefits, and I want climbers to be able to climb for as long as they want. And I think a lot of us, we talk about climbing as being a lifestyle sport, but we don't take care of ourselves like it's a lifestyle sport, or like we're going to be climbing when we're 60, 70, or 80. And we really should, because you can totally do that if you're strength training. Like, you're going to be healthy enough, you're going to have the work capacity to hike to the crag, to climb, to jump, to fall, all of that stuff. And so if you really think that climbing is a lifestyle sport, you should be strength training. And so that's why I put out a lot of the content that I do. That's why I have a lot of the programs out that I do, is because I believe so strongly in the benefit of strength training. And yeah, I'm going to continue competing in powerlifting for as long as I am excited about it. So yeah. So going back a little bit, so I took probably 6 years, might have been 7, off of climbing completely. Like, I think I climbed like a couple of times in that time frame just to pop into the gym and say hi to people, but wasn't climbing at all. And in 2020, when the lockdowns happened, I decided to build a climbing wall in my backyard. And so I got a tension climbing board in my backyard and started climbing with some neighbors who were here. And I also, like, in anticipation of building the board, like, I knew that I was deconditioned. Like, my body was strong, but I knew that, like, my forearms and my fingers were deconditioned. So my friend Noah was my neighbor at the time. We started like hangboarding, and my friend David Light, we started hangboarding regularly in my backyard. I got a tension hangboard, and before I even had the wall built, we were doing some hangboarding regularly. Like, none of the climbing gyms were open, so they couldn't climb either. So we just got really into hangboard training. And I remember working back up to old numbers, and even past that. I think I got up to like a 70-pound hang for 10 seconds on a 20 mil edge, and probably could have gotten heavier than that. But at that weight, it's just like my shoulders are like, okay, we don't really love this. So I started transitioning to like a smaller edge and had to like back the weight off. But yeah, we did a bunch of hangboard training to prep for starting to climb again. Got the board finally built, and I started climbing again in 2020, like late 2020. And I remember when I first started climbing on the tension board, I could only climb V3s on it. Like, V3s were kind of like, because the board is 40 degrees overhung too. And I just like wasn't used to climbing anymore. And also, like, if you've never climbed on a tension board before, the style and like the holds take a little bit of getting used to. So I remember starting at V3, which, I don't know how anyone else feels about that, but yeah, V3. And within a year, I was climbing like V9 again, which kind of blew my mind, because it's climbing outdoor V9. I think I ended up climbing like V8 on the moon board, or on the tension board, and like a bunch of V7s, and climbing a few V9s outdoors within a year of starting to climb again after 6 years off. And I really, really credit my strength training for that, because none of the climbing moves felt hard anymore. It was really just taking my time to get my fingers readapted to climbing so that I didn't get a finger injury, because I knew that like the strength was there. I just needed some time for my fingers to get conditioned. So I really paced myself. And even through pacing myself, I was able to get all the way back up to climbing V9 again at a much heavier body weight, by the way. Probably 20 pounds heavier. I lost a little weight during the pandemic because I had bulked up to 162 before that for powerlifting. And then when the lockdowns happened, I was like, all right, well, I don't know when I'm going to do another powerlifting meet. So I don't really need to be like this big. So lost a little bit of weight, but still much heavier than what I used to climb at. I think back in the day I would compete at like 112 pounds, and I was weighing like anywhere from 135 to like 145 when I was climbing on the tension board and outdoors in the last few years. So like significantly heavier, but only climbing like 1 or 2 grades lower than what I used to do. I remember when the gyms opened up again and I could start climbing at the gym and climbing on stuff that wasn't just the tension board. I was climbing like regularly, flashing V7, climbing V8s pretty regularly. At a certain point, we started climbing my climbing gym had a moon board, and I was really excited because I've never climbed on a moon board before. And I started climbing on the moon board with my friend Vikas and his brother Vishal and my friend Eli and Henry and sometimes Mike Light. We had like a little crew. And yeah, I was able to start climbing like V7, V8, V9 on the moon board. Like pretty quickly, and like sending like pretty hard climbs, and that never used to happen to me before. So back when I was like competing in climbing and I was like winning climbing comps and I was climbing like V10, V11 outside, I could barely climb V7 at the gym. Like indoor climbing is harder for me. I can definitely climb harder outside, and I think a lot of that has to do with like setting and being shorter and stuff like that. But I would hardly ever send V7s in the gym. I would very, very, very rarely send V8. I think I had never sent a V9 in the gym before, and I think I had sent one, like somebody set like a really scrunchy V10 one time that I'd sent inside of the gym. But like climbing V8s was like not a regular occurrence, and I was like climbing V8s. I was flashing some of them, definitely flashing a lot of V7s. Like it was wild to me, because not only was I significantly heavier, but I was performing at a level I could never have imagined. And I know that's not like elite level for people, and like that's not elite anymore, but for my personal climbing, like that was something I could never do before. And so that really told me like, wow, I am significantly stronger than what I used to be. And even though I'm heavier, it doesn't really seem to be making a difference. And yeah, I was able to climb like a few V9s outside pretty quickly. Never ended up climbing anything harder than that because I didn't try anything harder than that. But honestly, like when I'm in climbing shape right now, with the strength that I have, I honestly feel like if I could project, I could probably send like V12, maybe the right V13. If I had like multiple tries to go out and like project something. There's just nothing like that close here, and I never got to get on anything super hard. Got close to like some V10s and stuff, but just didn't go back to them. So yeah, I mean it's pretty cool to feel that, and it's like opposite of like what a lot of climbers think is going to happen when you get stronger and when you gain weight. Like a lot of people are like, no, you're going to feel heavier, like, and if you want to climb those grades you have to be lighter. And I'm telling you, it's not true. Like you can get your fingers strong. Obviously, like I spent that year pacing myself and working on my finger strength, but I was able to get back up to that level pretty quickly in the grand scheme of things. And I remember going out, so climbs that I used to pick in the past, I would always pick something technical, usually my hardest sends were going to be like vertical crimp ladders, because that's what I was good at. Vertical, technical crimp ladders. And I remember climbing in Tahoe with my friend Vikas, and he showed me this climb on YouTube called Kung Fu Panda. It's a V10. There's like a V9 or V8 stand start to it, and we went out to that climb. And I did the stand start, which I think is like V8 or 9, pretty quickly. And I wanted to do the sit start, and I think I could have done the sit start, but the sun was going down, unfortunately. But this climb, it was like a significant shift away from my typical style that I would normally pick. So I'm going to post a video. I'll post a video of this climb on Instagram, but this climb is like a steep overhung, like I was maxed out wingspan, compression sloper climb. Not something I would ever pick in the past. Like I would have looked at that and been like, that is not for me. There is absolutely no way I could do it. And there wasn't. I would never have been able to do something like that. But being stronger now, it's like it has unlocked this entire world of new climbs for me and styles for me that I can now just do. And it's pretty wild to me. I'm like, what? I can do like a super overhung, like compression sloper climb? That is wild to me. And I would still like to go back and get that sit start. But did do the sand start, and I can post a video of that. And you'll see like how wide how wide it is. And there's also a move on it where you're on a sloper with your left hand, and you're on a sloper that has a little bit of like an edge on it with your right hand, like a little bit of a crimp edge on it with your right hand. And you have this like toe hook, and then you have to just like you have to do this big huge you're supposed to do like a big jump to this like jug, but I could not reach the jug. So I actually had to do a move that was like significantly harder, where I had to the jug is like this huge flake that is if you follow the flake down, it turns into this like small crack and there's like a little small like crimp rail to the left of like where the jug is. And instead of doing the big move right, jumping to the jug like everybody does on YouTube, I actually had to just like commit to like back flopping super hard. And it's like a like high enough fall that like it would knock the wind out of you. And doing like a full span like left hand cross to barely catch this like little 3-finger crimp right before the jug, hold my tension, and then jump out to the jug and let myself cut and swing around. And then from there, it's like probably like a V3 or something to top it out on the rest of the seam. But it was significantly harder, but I was able to do like a full span, full tension, sloper move, plus like a little crux that no one else has to do because they're tall. And I don't know, I was just really impressed with myself, and it really made me realize like how different of a climber I am now than I used to be. And, yeah, I just constantly surprise myself with the kind of moves that I can do, or the kind of like shouldery moves, the power moves, the all kinds of stuff that I like. It's just not in my repertoire, and I just like I had just started to realize I could do that stuff because I had the strength to do it. And it was really cool. And you know, I'm just trying to tell climbers like how cool this is, and especially if you're short, like the stronger, you just have to be stronger. Like we all know that the grade scale favors taller climbers. And so the stronger you are, the more you're going to be able to unlock for yourself, grade wise, but also the more like different techniques and the more different styles of climbing you're going to be able to unlock for yourself because you're stronger. So it's been really cool to experience that. But, and that's not the only climb that's happened, but that's the one that comes to mind the most. And I also have like some video of it that I can share. But yeah, probably like the end of like 2022, beginning of 2023, probably like the hardest time of my life, maybe ever. Some of you might not know, but my aunt died not unexpectedly. She was in the hospital for like a month, but like she was young. She's not supposed to die. She was like 69 or 70, and she passed away. And then literally 2 months later, or not 2 days later, literally 2 days later, my mom passed away. My mom got COVID. She had COPD. And she got COVID, and as soon as she got COVID, she, like, less than 48 hours, she had passed. And it was really unexpected. And that was very hard. It was really hard for my family. My family lives in Southern California still. So I, immediately flew down there when I found out. And one of the hardest things was that we didn't have the funeral for months. I can't remember how many months it was, but we didn't have the funeral for months and months. And so it really felt like I was holding my breath, waiting. It felt like the grieving process couldn't really start until we had the funeral. And that was really hard. Powerlifting was feeling really hard around then. I was starting to get less motivated for climbing. At that point, I was like balancing powerlifting and climbing. So I was powerlifting 3 days a week and climbing like twice a week. And it was just a really hard time. I had some like health scares with my cat, who's 15. He had a couple things happen to him where I thought I was gonna lose him. He had a couple like vet emergencies, and he's great now, but that was really hard. Had some really tough relationships and a lot of like learning experiences in that time frame. And after that, I got sick last year, probably when was that? I want to say it was like sometime in like January, maybe even Feb. I can't remember now, but I got sick, and it wasn't COVID. And I got COVID in January, and then I got sick again, I think in February, or I don't remember the time frame now, but I ended up getting sick, and I lost my appetite for 6 days. Like, I literally just lost my appetite. Like, nothing sounded good, and I couldn't even force myself to eat. And like, that's never really happened to me before. And all I could do is drink juice. Like, all I wanted was like juice for some reason. And so I was trying to drink as much juice as possible, and I was trying to force down some like protein shakes and stuff so that I wouldn't lose weight. But I ended up like accidentally losing like 6 or 7 pounds. And already at that time, I was like a little bit lighter than I probably should have been, because of all the stress, and I was just training a lot too. So I was already hanging out a little bit light. And I ended up losing 6 pounds and like weighing 129 pounds, which felt awful. Like, I haven't been that light since like right after I started strength training. Like, it had been probably like years and years since I've been that light, and it felt terrible. My lifts felt awful. My climbing felt awful because I was exhausted. Even though I was lighter, I was exhausted. My lifts were starting to tank. I felt like very small, and it didn't feel good to me. And I felt really worried that I was losing all like the muscle mass that I had worked hard for. So, right after all of that, I decided to work on gaining some more weight again. And I wanted to focus on powerlifting. I was like tired of my lifts feeling like stagnant, and I wanted to put a little bit more focus into powerlifting. So that's what I've been doing most of 2023, is gaining some weight, trying to put on some muscle, and focusing mostly on powerlifting. And it's paid off, because this year, I decided to fill out my weight class and hang out like right at the top of my weight class, or maybe slightly above. And my last meet that I had was probably the best meet that I've ever had. I hit some PRs and just felt really, really strong. I ended up squatting 330 pounds. And then at the gym, like a couple days after the meet, I squatted 342 pounds. So I would love to do that or more in a meet next time. And my squat benefited the most from gaining weight. Like it was very clear. My bench press, I had a shoulder injury that I was also struggling with. I like had tweaked my shoulder climbing actually in April. And so it was sort of like a little touch and go with my shoulder. So my bench wasn't that good at that meet. It was like 175. My PR is like 187. So it wasn't like my best ever, but it wasn't awful either. And my deadlift was 380, which was like a 5 pound meet PR. So that was really exciting. And now my shoulder's feeling better, so I'm looking forward to like hitting more of my bench at the next meet too. But yeah, at that meet I got some state records. Competed in a new federation. Normally I compete in USPA. This was WRPF. I have records. I have state records in the bench press and in the total in USPA. Multiple records for the bench press. And then at this meet, I got a state record in masters for the squat, state record in masters for the bench press, and a state record in masters for the deadlift. And I also won my weight class at in my age category at that meet too. So it was a great meet. I feel really good about gaining some weight and putting on some more muscle for powerlifting. And so that's sort of where I am right now. Is this last year I just wanted to get stronger and prioritize powerlifting. And you can balance both sports. I get a lot of questions about balancing both sports, and you can definitely do it. If you're not already doing both sports, you have to kind of taper in the thing that you want to start doing more of. And sometimes that means you also have to remove. So, like, I normally powerlift like 4 days a week. And I tapered down to 3 days a week so that I could stick in another day of climbing and climb 2 days a week. And I was doing pretty good. Like I was climbing well, I was powerlifting okay. But I knew I wasn't like, you can't prioritize everything, and you can't be like your absolute best when you're doing too much. And so there comes a time where you have to decide, like, do I want to continue just being okay at both of these, or do I want to prioritize one over the other? And I decided I wanted to prioritize powerlifting. So I just kind of took the climbing out. And also around that same time, I had a good climbing crew, and we would do like moonboard sessions and stuff like that. And everybody's schedules kind of changed, and people started going to different gyms or climbing at different times. And I just haven't gotten another crew together to climb with. So just like sort of lost my psyche a little bit for climbing. But I'm not worried about it because I feel like the psyche will return. And this year, going into 2024, I'm already starting to feel some of that psyche for climbing returning. And I've started doing some finger training again. So I'm excited for that. But I'm still excited to powerlift. I would really, really like to work on my bench press. And get in the like 200 club on bench press, which for me means I'm going to need to gain some more upper body mass. So that's what I'm currently working on. But starting to bring climbing back into that too. So, but I think it's okay to like not climb. It's also okay to not powerlift. I'm not going to just completely take out strength training if I ever did that, but I could see myself getting into climbing and like deprioritizing powerlifting a little bit, but I would still strength train at least 2 or 3 times a week probably. But with climbing, like I feel okay like not climbing because the strength training really keeps my body in really good shape for climbing, and it's not very hard for me to get back into climbing. Like when I take a break, like I haven't climbed in a few months, and I can generally still go into the gym and climb V7. I just get pumped really fast. But once I climb like regularly for like a couple of months, it like I'm back to climbing like to flashing like V7s and 8s at the gym, and back at that like that level again. So I'm not too worried about it. I haven't taken 6 years off now. So I still have some of my forearm conditioning. And the other day I started a new hangboard plan or a new hangboard protocol. And I was really surprised because I think the most I've ever picked up on a no hang is like maybe I thought it was 100 pounds. I was looking back at videos and I couldn't tell what was on there, and for some reason I don't have it written down anywhere, but it was either like 100 pounds or 110 pounds. And I was easily able to do 100 pounds like multiple times the other day at the gym, which was very surprising to me because when I climb now, I feel like my finger strength isn't as good as it could be, but like clearly I haven't lost very much. So I don't think that it's going to be very hard to get back into it when I want to. And I feel really comfortable doing that. And I don't feel bad about taking time away from either sport and just following wherever the psych leads me. So that's kind of what I'm doing. But I think the biggest lesson that I've learned through climbing and through powerlifting is that you just need to show up. Like, I wasn't very good or strong at climbing when I first started. I wasn't good at all at powerlifting when I first started, but I've just developed a lot of grit over the years, and I just continue to show up. I show up when it's feeling good. I show up when it's feeling bad. I show up when I don't want to. I find ways to tick those boxes, and I find ways to make training doable so that I can keep showing up and I can keep doing it at least a little bit. And if you do that, if you keep showing up for years and years and years, the places you can go with the things that you want to do are pretty incredible. Like, it's incredible what happens in 10 years. And sometimes people think that like, oh wow, like you blew up in powerlifting all of a sudden, and it's like, no, I didn't. I've just been doing it for 10 years. And for climbing, it was the same thing. I had been doing it for a long time and like not doing well at climbing outside, not doing well at competitions, but I just kept going and I kept doing them and I got better. So that's sort of the lesson, is like, just keep showing up, just find ways that you can continue to show up. Find a minimum viable schedule for yourself and keep showing up. But yeah, that's sort of like not a brief because it's been like an hour and a half, but an overview of sort of what climbing and powerlifting has been like for me. Tried to answer some of the questions that I got on Instagram through all of that. So hopefully that answers people's questions. But if you have any other questions, feel free to message me on Instagram. Yeah, but all that to say, like, this is why I do what I do, and this is why I coach the way that I coach, and this is why that I'm so passionate about strength training for climbers, because I've just seen the benefits for myself, and I've seen the benefits for my clients, and at this point, I've literally worked with like hundreds of climbers on strength training, and just I haven't met a single person who didn't think strength training was helpful for them. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of insight into who I am, why I do what I do. Hopefully that wasn't too boring for people. I don't really know how to make an about me like more exciting. I feel like I'm better in an interview where I'm on someone's podcast and they're asking me questions, but hopefully, you got something out of this episode. And if you are on board with the Stronger Not Smaller movement, and you're a climber who wants to get stronger, not just for the short term, but for the long term and for the long haul, you're going to want to stick around. You're going to want to pay attention to my Instagram, to my emails if you're on my email list, and hopefully to this podcast if I can get a few more podcast episodes out in January. But I do have something coming. Can't tell you what it is yet, but I am going to talk about it more and put out some more details on Instagram. next week sometime. So if you're not already following me on Instagram, go ahead and do that. If you are, pay attention because I have something really exciting coming, and hopefully the stories that I've just told you here are inspiring and have gotten you excited about strength training. But thank you for listening. If you've made it all the way to the end of this podcast, this is definitely my longest episode. And hopefully that wasn't too much rambling. Hopefully you guys found that interesting and you got something out of it. But thanks for listening, and I will catch you on the next one.